Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the May 12th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Shout out to those who are watching on Facebook Live. Shout out to those who are watching on YouTube Live. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because, again, it helps me monetize YouTube. I'm only 99,000. I'm not a math person, but 696. That's all right. Yeah. 696 people away from getting at least $6 to $10 off of YouTube. So I need that because listen, this pandemic unemployment has taken me a little bit to get right, and so I need all the coins that I can get at this time. Listen, my daughter's private school tuition still has to get paid. It's a Jesus school, right? But they still need their money. I tried to give them some scripture, but they still wasn't trying to listen to none of that. They said, "Listen, Phil, Mr. Roundtree, we need the 7 bills, right? So make sure you hit that Cash App Quantified LLC. That allows me to continue to keep bringing this content. Now, either way, I'm gonna continue to bring it. Listen, we got a dope guest in the building today. She is the Pennsylvania State Representative representing District 191. Her name is Joanna McClinton, Esquire. Now, I was going to sit here and read the bio, but you gave me like 10 paragraphs. Hope gave me 10 paragraphs. Somebody tell Hope, no, listen, take a couple lines out, right? Just because I can't get in all that. We're going to be here all night. But no, shout out to you, Miss McClinton, for joining me tonight. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Glad to be on here with you, Phil.
Word, word. So instead of me reading the bio, I always like to ask people who are they, right? Because it's like on a job interview. That might be one of the toughest questions. Like, well, who are you? And it's like we have no idea, right? So I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask you, who are you? Who is Joanna McClinton?
Who am I? I am a state legislator. So I am my neighborhood's voice in Harrisburg, in our state capital here in Pennsylvania. I've been doing that for almost 5 years. The communities that I serve are right where I live: Cobbs Creek, West, Southwest Philly, Lower Delco, Darby Borough, and Yaden. And like you too, I wear several hats. I don't have one on tonight, but I have a few hats. So that's my state rep hat. The other hat that I wear is I'm also an attorney. I've been out of law school since '06, so for a couple minutes. Another hat I wear, as you know, I just hung up a clergy meeting with my church. I'm a minister there, Open Door in West Philly, and that's who Joanna is. She wears all the hats. The hat I wore before the church meeting, I was cooking, and when we hang up, I got to do some dishes.
Word, word. So I think a lot of people want to know what were you cooking?
So I am in a 21-day challenge. Shout out to Gym Rats. That's a gym in my district at 62nd and Larchwood. They're closed. Everything is closed, but we're doing virtual workouts, and a part of our workouts includes recommended meals. So tonight I had tacos, but I don't eat chicken, so I made shrimp cooked in garlic, red onions, red peppers, and black beans. Now we were supposed to have corn, and I almost cried last night when I looked in the freezer and there was no regular corn. I'm like, I've seen it in here. I don't know what happened to it. So last night I gave up on the tacos. I just had the kale salad twice. So this night I incorporated the corn on the cob that was in there and said, you know what? You can't always have everything when you're not as prepared as you thought you were. See, I thought I was prepared, but it turned out girl wasn't as prepared as I thought I was. So yeah.
Word. It sounds good, and it sounds like you one of the people that's been buying all up with the stuff at the market. That's what
I
it
mean,
sounds like.
I bought that corn like last year, but I think my mother made it with some soup. So you know.
Yeah. No, well, again, I appreciate you having you on. So we're just gonna get right into it and make sure you guys drop your questions, and we definitely will be answering them. I don't want this to be too formal, as you've heard me on the radio and heard me on podcasts or what have you. This is just regular conversation, right? And so you can keep it real with me, right? You can keep it real. You don't gotta give me the PC answers, right? You can say I don't want to answer, because again, I still have to ask though, right? Because I wouldn't be can I call myself a journalist? I'm calling it. I don't care.
You're a leader in media. You're on the radio every day. I mean, is Jim Gardner a journalist? He's on the news every night.
Word, word. Well, I'm a journalist, so I got to get my questions. I got to get my questions off. So we're gonna hop right into it, man. Just this idea of COVID-19, the coronavirus, or as Black folk call it, the Rona, right? The Rona. How have you been coping?
The Rona has given me so many challenges like everybody else. I tell anyone that asks, I have days where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have to go to Harrisburg. I can work from home. I don't have to get on the turnpike. I don't have to drive 120 miles and go to the state capitol and stay 3 days and come home. I can do all that work from home. But then there's other days where I'm like, I miss my colleagues. I miss my office. I miss my community. People that know me know I'm a hugger. I'm one of those touchy feely people like, hey, how you doing? Shake your hand, hug you if you're welcome. So that starts to bring a toll on you because some people are saying extroverts are having a hard time. I consider myself an extroverted introvert. Now, you should be able to understand that if anyone can. So
Facts.
I miss being around people. I miss my friends. I miss a lot of folks. And that brings its difficult moments where I had a great day and then it's at night and I'm like, oh my goodness, how long is Rona going to have us in this house?
Yeah.
When are we going to go back to things as normal?
Word, word. No, I completely understand. It's one of those things where this is a new norm for us, right? And so we're all trying to adjust and adapt the best way that we can. And so I always got to salute everybody, right? Because we haven't experienced this before. I don't think, the last time we've experienced something like this in the world is probably what, the Spanish flu back in like the early 1900s, right?
And
So
it
we,
wasn't as devastating.
yeah, yeah. Especially when, um, all of the advances, which may have hurt us, right? Like all the technological advances that we've made, um, they've kind of handicapped us because we don't know how to just sit and chill. All we're used to is being on the run.
Go.
We always have to have something to do. And so this is like that forced sit down,
Hmm.
which many of us, even though we don't think we need it, we do, right?
Hmm.
So with that, what do you think? What are your views on just the public's response? I think now we're at a place where we're seeing a certain demographic. They're getting a little wary. They're getting a little wary with the quarantine, with the stay at home orders. But what are your thoughts with regards to that, and then just overall of how we've adapted?
So I think people in the neighborhoods are adapting really well. I live right by Cobbs Creek. I take walks regularly. I see people with masks on. When I go to the store and don't buy the corn I need for my tacos on Tuesdays, people have masks on. People are, staying away, not getting all up in your space for the most part. But I do see on the news, not in my neighborhood, but in other neighborhoods where people are protesting around Pennsylvania. I have been working from home since March 16th, so I haven't been to the state capitol. But 2 weeks ago, there was a huge protest on the Capitol steps where people were just like, give me liberty or give me death. That was the slogan, saying that their freedom was being infringed upon, and that they wanted to be able to go back to work immediately. So everybody is not taking it well. Some people are having a very hard time.
Yeah, yeah. And again, we saw the demographic. We saw white people. Like again, I got to keep it real. We saw white people. I know you might not be able to say it.
It wasn't my neighborhood.
It wasn't your neighborhood, right? No, it was a lot of white people. It was a lot of frustrated people. They definitely were well within their right to protest, even though there was a lot of irony in their protests, right? And how they approached it, comparatively speaking to the black community versus white folk. They still do not understand, why Kaepernick kneeled, but that's another conversation for.
Can we talk about it?
Oh,
Can we talk about
hey, listen,
it?
go ahead, do your thing.
So, in the state capitol in Michigan, people were screaming at law enforcement, spitting at them all up in their faces, like they were about to jack those members of law enforcement up. Now, I don't know if they were state police, if they were members of the National Guard, but they were all in their faces like they were going to hurt them pretty seriously. Now, in our state capitol at the protest, it wasn't quite that intense, but you see mobs predominantly filled with Caucasians who were angry getting into it with law enforcement. Now let's flip back over 2 NFL seasons ago when my man with the afro took a knee simply to protest Black lives mattering, being important, and the fact that we are more likely than any others to be subject to police brutality, or what we just saw, the arrest that happened 73 days later after our guy Ahmaud was hunted down, chased after like an animal. It's really upsetting to me.
I wasn't expecting it. Like I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know if you were going to be PC, right? I didn't know if there were certain things that you had to stray away from, but I can appreciate that, right? I can appreciate that because for so often we only see the the politician side of the politician, right? And we never get to see the human side. And so I can appreciate that, and your recognition that first there is a double standard that exists out in this world, and not being afraid to speak to it, right? So I don't know what that means. I I think what it is nobody wants to potentially lose their seat, right? Or lose their
Correct.
spot. Once they're in that spot, they want to keep it, they want to hold it for life, right? And so what that means is that Michael Jordan, we saw that in the last dance where it's just like, nah, I'm not going to speak out on these issues.
No comments.
Exactly.
My beloved, nobody loves President Obama more than me. But on some issues, he was just like, listen, the microphone's not on. I'm not talking about that. It's not a big rally for that. I could lead the charge, but I'm not. I'm not here for all of that. And I know that people who are in higher office, way higher than, someone in the state capitol, way higher, they have all of these things to calculate, from people who support them. What will they say? From folks who financially contribute to their campaigns. What will they say? To people who are their base, how will they react? I mean, people expect politicians to make a decision on one thing. That's the next election. But in fact, there are lots of usual factors that go into whether or not someone's going to speak out on an issue, stay quiet on one, or just keep it to themselves. But as for my constituents, I've always told them, and of course, they have a decision to make June 2nd. But I always tell them, I'm going to be me, and I'm going to do my very best to represent you all in a way that makes you proud, to let you know that my office is working hard, and to let you know that when I get to the state capitol, I don't forget that I live right here on 60th Street, that I'm in your neighborhood, I'm from it, and that I'm speaking for you. I'm not just speaking for me and my career in politics. I'm speaking for you.
Yeah, yeah. Word, word. I think that's important, right? Just continuing to be authentic, and that's the concern that I have, and we're gonna get into that because I tasked you when I asked you to come on. I tasked you with the with the goal of getting me to vote, right? I make no bones about it. I consider myself full dissident. I'm completely detached from from this process, government, all of that, just because I don't find it to be productive in a way that it's being promoted. And again, we can have that conversation in a few. But no, I appreciate you being candid and you being open, and acknowledging what so many of us know, but we typically don't hear it, especially from black politicians, because again, it's not that many of us in these seats. And so for
Mhm,
some, it's just like, yo, we just got to stay here, right? And
mhm,
what you say about Obama is one of the criticisms that I have of him, that a lot of black folk have of him, is it's just like, what did you do for us, right? What did
mhm.
you do for us outside of the representation? Because we understand how important representation is, and it
Significant.
gets no higher than the office of the presidency. But then it's just like, okay, what was put in place to somehow help us? And just that whole idea of, well, I'm not the president of Black America, but I'm president of all of America. And I think Tom Joyner used to always play, whatever it was. It was like, When you make Black America better, you make all of America better, right? And so it's just that idea. So no, I appreciate that. But speaking of your colleagues in just in government in general. So what do you think? What are your thoughts on just the response to COVID-19, starting from a national level when we talk about your president, not mine, your president.
Yeah, you don't even vote, but now he's my
He
president.
your president. He your president. And speaking of your president, I don't. Was that today when he said go ask China to the Asian woman? Oh,
I think it was
that was
yesterday. It was
yesterday.
yesterday.
Oh my goodness.
The response nationally has been very disappointing. We can go back to March where it wasn't a big deal. We had the greatest economy. Everything was going to be okay. Fast forward, almost 70,000 people have passed away from this.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, how COVID hits a person depends on their health already. So, if they weren't healthy or if they were advanced in age, it was possible that they're likely to pass away from it. But when you see that testing is difficult to access, when you see that, we're far away from the equipment being readily available. I mean, if it's up to me, I'm not just sending out $1,200. I'm sending reusable masks. I'm not just sending, a one-time stimulus check. I'm sending one for every 60 days that you're out of work. I mean, this is a really tough time. And to see things like the Lakers getting a small business award, I'm like, we got some places in my district on Willen Avenue, on 60th Street, like that. Their business model doesn't qualify for a small business administration grant or loan, but we got the Lakers and Ruth Chris and who knows who else. That's just not right. So it's been disappointing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. And granted, I'm not in that realm, but it shows a lack of leadership, something that we already knew, but it's continually reinforced at this time, day after day after day, with these press conferences. And it's just, like, I look at him as being somebody. I look at him as pure entertainment, right? I look at him as pure entertainment. That's
But it's not SNL.
I
So,
I get
it's
it. I
pure.
get it.
It's not. And we're live from New York. Like he's live in the White House.
Yeah.
That has to make people who don't vote say, well, this time I need to get involved. This time I need to get engaged. Because this parody cannot continue. This is real life.
I understand that point, and I think this is an indictment on America and as a whole. I think when we talk about the idea of voting, I guess I could get into it now, and the reason why I choose not to participate in this system, because I look at the community that I'm a part of. I'm an American Negro, right? And so with that, when we talk about the lack of changes that take place across presidencies, across, what we talk about locally in local elections, even though I might be more inclined to vote in local elections as opposed to, nationally. But, we see the continuing problems when we talk about the wealth gap that exists, the inequality and inequity that takes place. It's just like, why would I vote? Just to get somebody out of office? Again, it's that lesser of two evils, but why should I be reduced to picking somebody who doesn't serve me, right? Who doesn't serve me at all, in my opinion. Typically, the socioeconomic status that you're born into, the class that you're born into, is the one that you die in, right? And so that speaks to a lot of factors, and I personally haven't seen how government has changed that one iota. I was hopeful, like if my man Bernie would have stepped up, I think that might have been the reason why I would have voted, right? On a national level. Now, again, locally, it's a I can understand reasoning as to why. I tell people the first time I vote, it'll be for myself when I run for city council. You know what I mean?
Okay, Phil, is this an announcement?
Nah, because honestly, I couldn't get away with giving my real thoughts on issues, man. It's not. I can't play that game. Like I worked for the city at DHS for 5 years, and I had confrontations with Nutter and Anne Marie Ambrose, and I just realized like I'm not a fan of bureaucracies, but that's just me personally, right? Now, but enough about me because I could talk about myself for days. When we when we talk about the local response, so we're talking about Tom Wolf's response
Mhm.
to COVID-19. When we talk about Mayor Kenny's response to COVID-19, what are your thoughts with regards to that?
So I'll start with super local. The mayor is doing an excellent job with ensuring that our FHQs, our health centers, and the inner city and our neighborhoods are now testing sites. So for those who live in my neighborhood, Sayre Health Center at 59th and Walnut is a testing site. You can go while you don't need an appointment. They are asking for you to call ahead. Penn Medicine runs that center, and from Monday through Friday, you can call 215-474-4444 so that you can just register and let them know you're on the way, you're around the corner, you're headed that way to get a test. Also, city services. I have been sharing on my social media for those who are struggling to pay rent. The city just got a grant that their application opened today, and people can apply if they've had trouble paying rent. On the state level, the governor has also made sure that there are more resources available. So people who need cash assistance, maybe you've never needed SNAP benefits, you've never needed help with groceries, but now you do. You can apply because you likely qualify if you've lost all your income or your hours were reduced. So the governor is in a hot seat. The mayor's in a hot seat. For those who covet those types of positions, now everybody's sitting back like, whoosh. That's a lot of responsibility. They have a ton of authority because this is an emergency. This isn't life as normal. So a lot of the regulations that even we see people protesting Wolf on now, he said, okay, you want to make sure you open up all your small businesses? Well, you're not going to get support from the state because all these tax dollars that they take out of our checks, they go around
Yeah.
to the 67 counties. They don't stay. And I always tell my colleagues when they get funny style, Philadelphia and our surrounding region, we do 40% of that $34 billion. Like those are our tax dollars. So, oh, your school district taking the money. We giving the money. We're not just taking it, we're also contributing. So he's told the counties that are going to protest and not enforce the stay-at-home order any further, the ones that are still in red, you won't get your support from the state. And I really hope it's not just a threat that has to be said. I hope it doesn't have to be enforced. And as tough as it is, it's tough for everybody. It's not unique to the people who were on the news being interviewed in media in Delco or last night in Bucks County. I mean, it's not unique to anyone. Everybody is having trouble, whether it's just emotionally or emotionally and financially. People are having trouble, but there has been help provided from the government. And for those who are not sure, I'm happy to have my office be assistant to you, whether you need help with unemployment, because yes, there is a backlog. Yes, it's taken longer than normal because we had 1.5 million people all apply in the last few weeks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you make great points there. I try to empathize with the protesters, right? Those who want to I try because I'm a social worker, I'm a therapist by trade, and so empathy,
Reopen.
empathy is a big part of the work that I do, and so I can understand why somebody who has a small business wants to open their business
Mhm.
back up because we're talking about survival. You talked about the Lakers getting a whole bunch of money, Ruth Chris getting $10 million, and here you are struggling to survive.
Yeah.
You're not sure how you're going to pay
Mhm.
next month's mortgage or this month's mortgage, right? Or how you're going to
Yeah.
get food or what have you. But I also think that there's a selfishness that exists when we talk about this virus that continues to negatively impact not only everybody but disproportionately impacting black and brown people. And so
Yes.
I think we see the privilege, like when I see these posts from people that I'm quote unquote cool with. And I think, we always Facebook and social media in general has a great way of showing you like who you're really cool with, right? And who you really like out here in these streets. And because it gives you insight into who people are. And so
Mhm.
whether it's the Ahmaud Arbery situation and seeing posts regarding that, or just the protest aspect and how supportive people are and people who are going to Subway with rocket launchers on their backs, and but yet they're shooting and killing 12-year-olds, right? For rest in peace Tamir Rice. And so I think a lot of people's privilege is showing, and again it highlights the inequity and inequality that exists just within America that we're
Yeah.
talking about. So with that, because I know we talked about a local level, a national level when it comes to just government, we're now in a place where we won't be able to make it to the polls, right?
Mhm.
Y'all not gonna be able to make it to the polls where you're walking.
You're going to vote this time.
I think my mom might just be hearing this for the first time too. Shout out to my mama. Uh, but now they've changed it to where now you can do mail-in voting, and so can you explain that a little bit? What that's like?
Absolutely. So last fall, one of the bills that we voted on was to change the election code. There are over 20 states in the United States that have had mail-in voting already on the books for years, where they don't necessarily go to the polls, but they go online, get a ballot, get it sent to their home, choose who they want, and mail it in. So Pennsylvania just did that for the first time. I know that usually on election day, I visit all the polling sites in my district. That's about 60 of them between Philly and Delaware County. And I just am saying hello. I do it when I'm on the ballot. I do it when I'm off the ballot, because it's honestly one of the best times to interact with your neighbors that won't necessarily come into your office up at 60th and Chestnut, or won't come to the state capitol. But you're like, hey, I'm your state rep. I send you the mail. I leave you the message. They're like, oh, okay, nice to finally meet you. So I always go to the polling places, taking selfies, having a good time. But this year, first of all, on June the 2nd, you're still going to need a mask. All right. So we think about wanting to be 6 feet away from people. Our city commissioners in Philly have already announced that our 800 and something polling places are going to be reduced to about 300 polling places. In Delaware County, it's also going to be cut in half. So where you used to go, like from my house, I can see my polling place. Like I can look outside, I can see it. It's not on my block, but I got to walk 2 blocks and then I'm right there. And it might be closed. Where I live in the 3rd Ward, there may be only one site. So, we're going from 22 to 1, perhaps, or to 2. And it's not clear because they haven't released it. So the best thing all of you who are watching can do, and shout out to everyone watching on my Instagram. I can't really interact with you at the same time. Multitasking, that's a 2021 goal.
You can tell them to come on over here, right? They could come on over to Qualify LLC on YouTube.
Go on to YouTube, go on to Facebook, rhetorically speaking. But you can go to votespa.com. Go tonight and request a mail-in ballot. You put in all your information that identifies you, your name, your address, your Pennsylvania driver's license number, and then you hit submit. You will get an email from our Pennsylvania Department of State. Hi, Joanna, we got your request. Then a few days later, you'll get another email. Hi, Joanna, the City Commissioner's Office of Philadelphia received your request. Your ballot is on the way. So I requested mine last week. Although we have until May 26th, request it now. Those of you who know you participate, Phil, we know you secretly vote. You're too opinionated not to go to the polls. Go ahead and votespa.com and request your ballot. Participate in the process. Let your voice be heard. We have everything from Attorney General to Auditor General. Those are statewide races. The Auditor General's race, for those of us who are Democrats, there are several people in that ring. I'm voting for Nina Ahmad. I look forward to that. Addition to that, we have people running for United States Congress. We have people running for the Pennsylvania House, and half of the Pennsylvania Senate is up for election. So we often complain about conditions. We complain about, the parity that unfortunately is unfolding every day in the White House. So there was a point where there was a contested primary for the Democrats. But now, even though everybody's name is on there, we're also choosing delegates who will probably virtually attend the DNC in August. So participate in this election. Participate. Vote by mail. It is safe. It is secure. It's a new law in Pennsylvania, but we may be voting by mail again in November. So if you figure, let me get a test run, we don't get a test run really, but you can do it in June and then you'll be ready to do it again in November.
Word. So my question with the mail-in voting, and I hate to try to be the pessimist all the time, right? But so no, I don't. I enjoy this.
Here we go.
No, so with mail-in voting, right? There's historically there's been issues with ballot tampering, and so with this, why would one think that this would be a reliable method, given how
Well,
people are, when we
mhm,
talk about
the
the
skeptics.
GOP and the various issues that have transpired over the years.
It's not only issues. I mean, when there is a contested race, me serving in the House now for 5 years, recently getting into leadership, I serve my colleagues as the House Democratic Caucus Chair. Thank you to all my colleagues for your support. That being said, we've had races in the House where we've had to go to court to contest the numbers. Like, so don't think that this is going to be some getaway party. I mean, I don't know how old you are, Phil, but the first time I voted was in 2000. I was 18 years old. I was a sophomore at LaSalle. I was so hyped to vote for a presidential election. Voted for Al Gore, stayed up till like 3 in the morning. There was no decision. Like, this is crazy. How is there no president? Like I casted my ballot, and that year, as in this year, Pennsylvania was blue. All of our electoral votes, went to Al Gore. I was hype. I'm sitting up in my room, and I was a political science major, so I was extra hype.
Yeah.
Had been working at the DNC and everything. And there was no outcome because of what happened in Florida. And they ended up going to court. So people go to court for results. So if anything seems fishy, believe me, we will contest it. We're not going to let the GOP get over on us, hide ballots, put them somewhere else. There is a transparent process in every county. But of course, we are looking. We have had colleagues that haven't been elected until after we go to court and find out, oh, they won by 3 votes. 4 votes, 5 votes. So for the people who think their votes don't count, every vote definitely counts.
But you do understand why there will be skepticism and detractors to this process in general, right?
For sure. I mean, look at our president.
Yeah.
If he could, he'd take all our ballots and cross it out
Yeah.
like he did those checks and put his name on it. I mean, I can't say it's above him. If he had a way to access them in November, like the machines would come loaded with his votes on there already. Like, let's not be fooled by the fact that Frederick Douglass said power concedes nothing without struggle. Like, nobody's giving up power.
Yeah.
That's why I encourage you, Phil, to become a voter.
Encouraged. I did ask for this, right? Yeah, I'm still nowhere there yet. But we can get into this, right? We can get into this idea of voting, especially amongst black and brown people. Somebody in the chat brought up Puffy. Y'all homie Puffy. I'm not a Puffy fan because I haven't been a Puffy fan since Vote or Die because I just thought that was a bonkers slogan and message to be putting out into the world. And apparently he's now switched. Right, he's no longer vote or die, which again, that's just preposterous to me. So one of the reasons why I don't vote, right? They like your ancestor died for, it. And I'm sure you gonna hit me with that at some point before you get off.
Notice I didn't say that.
Well,
That was not one of the reasons that I provided.
all right, but that's typically what I hear, and my response always to that is no. The ancestors died for the right. Right? If I want to go sit on the back of the bus, I want to do it because that's what I choose to do. And so I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams as well when it comes to not voting. Right? So I just had to get that out there. But with Puffy within the last 2 weeks, and I've saw others, mainly celebrities, but they're talking about the idea of holding their vote hostage. Puff said that unless Joe Biden came out with an agenda specifically for black folk, then he couldn't guarantee that he was going to vote for him. Now, unfortunately, he did this on Naomi Campbell's platform, and I know she's not going to push back against that because my next question would be, well, what does this mean? Are you not going to vote? Are you going to vote for Trump if he has a black agenda, but he didn't she didn't go there. But that's one of my questions. Where what are your thoughts on this idea of holding your vote to see who can best serve you?
So when there is a contested race, I definitely think you need to vote your interests, your community's interests, your family's interests, all the people with whom you deem worth having an agenda and being on the agenda for advancement. Of course, not any agenda, but an agenda for advancement, agenda for uplifting a community. You mentioned running for council one day, so there was just a hotly contested council race just last year where people were running against longtime incumbents, where people were running for the first time. We have the largest amount of millennials in council ever in history, right? So we see that people are getting engaged, they're getting active, they're excited. But I do think that someone needs to earn your vote. You can't just say, well, I'm Republican, so I'm voting Republican, which of course I'm not. I've never voted Republican, but I'm a Democrat and I do vote Democrat every election. But I do know that you should be intelligent with your vote. So that means if someone's running for election like Joe Biden, who I'm supporting and glad to do everything necessary to see him there, not the current occupant of the White House, you need to figure out what is your agenda for my community. And if that person's not talking about an agenda for your community, then you need to let that person know, or that candidate know, you need one for where I live. You need one for the fight that I'm having, because it's not the same one that someone's having in a different zip code or a different state or a different part of just this state, Pennsylvania. The people have different concerns and different priorities. We see the protests that are happening in media. They're not happening on 52nd Street. Notice that. So people's needs are different. Their priorities are. And I do think that not only do we have an agenda for when we do vote, but once someone is elected, we then need to be like, okay, so when you were on the campaign trail, you said that this was your priority. So when can we meet with your staff or meet with you to talk about X? Because another thing that many times we don't do in our neighborhoods, and it's because we have a lot on our plates. We have so many different challenges that we're facing, but we don't always hold elected officials accountable. And then we say, I'm not voting, or, it doesn't matter, or, nothing's changed. But no, if you voted for this person to become a member of council last year, you need to call their office and say, this is my concern. Or if you didn't vote for me, but I'm your state rep, you need to call my office while I'm here until my term expires and say, this is what I need from you. Because what we don't do is put the burden and responsibility on them like we should. They are leaders in public office. And you think there are 253 legislators in Pennsylvania, 203 in the House, 50 in the Senate. There are only 9 Black women. So like you said at the beginning, when we were talking about President Obama, representation matters. We need to have women in these spaces. We need to have people of color in these spaces. Of that 253, less than 30 are African American. I mean, so when we're talking about what type of colleagues I have and what types of agendas they might have from their districts, you've got to realize that you want someone who will stand up and go on the agenda you had for them when you casted the ballot.
Yeah, Question. Now, you brought up Joe Biden, right? And so right now, although the spotlight is on COVID-19 and what's taking place there, he's going through a scandal, right? It's a scandal. I don't know any other word to call it. And he's said his position. It didn't happen, right? That was his, that's his response pretty much. So how do you reconcile this, just this scandal with him, the allegations, the Me Too movement, with who you are as a woman, who you are as a Black woman? Was his response adequate enough for you? And then we also see Stacey Abrams and Kamala Harris getting a lot of pushback because they're saying that they're going to continue to support him. So just what are your thoughts on those?
So I was surprised to hear such an allegation. We had already gone through many months of the is Vice President, former Vice President Biden, too touchy? Is he too Philly? Is he making women feel uncomfortable? And as a woman, that is very concerning because not only am I currently holding public office, but in my past career, I worked for an elected official. So I'm looking at it from every sort of angle possible, not just me as that person, but also me as that staffer, me as that person working in the Senate. And it is concerning in any set of circumstances where a woman especially says, hey, I've been violated. And I think that it needs to be taken seriously. In this set of circumstances, because we're looking at a few decades that have passed and very little opportunity to do much, whether you would say, well, I want my day in court. Well, it doesn't seem to be that anybody wants to pick this case up and have a day in court for what she described happening to her. So, what is one left to do in terms of getting their voice out there? You say what it happened and he's saying it didn't. And it's not just him saying that it didn't. It's also the people who worked in his office at the same time. And having worked in an office for an elected official, you all talk. Like, they're not there all the time. They're voting. They're on the floor. They're go speak somewhere. And you all are in the office together. So the fact that his staff is also saying, like, oh, yes, we remember this time period in the 90s. We remember this staff member, but we never remember any uncomfortable situations or even anybody saying anything. And then the skeptic in me, and then it's not about an attack against women, is saying, well, it's now this gentleman's time, running for president and the Democratic nominee. Now, this gentleman isn't just someone that popped out. I mean, he's been in the Senate for decades, vice president twice. So I wonder at what point, if it was me as the person, would I have said, well, I want people to know something about this guy that was just picked for vice president. I mean, this isn't like someone who's just coming to the public eye right now. Like, this gentleman has been at the very top for a long time. So I have a little skepticism. I was an assistant public defender for a long time. So reasonable doubt is something I know how to look through and create. And my first question, if I'm his attorney, is, well, where was this allegation when you were vetted for vice president? Where was this allegation when you were vice president the next time? Where was this allegation for the 20 years that elapsed that you were in the United States Senate? And unlike our current occupant of the White House, we're not talking about 27 women saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is sickening.
So I mean, with that though, because we know when we talk, and I'm not going to sit here and say she's a survivor, right? Because I'm not privy to what took place or what did not take place, right? But we do know that survivors, it can take a while for them to acknowledge their truth and to verbalize their truth. So I understand the skepticism aspect of it because it's a long time, but also with regards to survivors and information that we have and how difficult it can be to talk about your truth, right? It could have been just this moment where she's like, I'm ready, right? And it just happened to coincide. Again, it could look fishy, right? It could look kind of shady, but I don't want to negate what her truth could potentially be. Now, in saying that, I guess my thing is for those, because I do know several people who said, well, you know what, I'm just not voting because I'm not voting for Biden. There's no way. Do you think people should compartmentalize and recognize and acknowledge and say, well, you know what, whatever happened, or what didn't happen, but still we have this guy in the White House, so he needs not be there. And so should they put their own personal feelings aside with regards to who Joe Biden is and compartmentalize and say, for the greater good of the world, of the greater good of humanity, because that's what we're talking about with Trump. We're literally talking about crimes against humanity. And so
around the world,
should we put whatever he's alleged to have done off to the side and still vote just because we have to get Trump out?
So I'm not able to tell anyone, what exactly you should do in determining how to support Joe Biden. But what I tell people that I'm in the privilege of mentoring or inspiring is to, go pull your book out. And some of us can do this out loud. We can do it without needing to write it down, and make a cost benefit analysis. Figure out what are the benefits to one candidate over the other, and why another should, earn your vote, why they deserve it, and why they can also advance your agenda. As I said, I'm proudly Democratic, vote Democrat, but people do need to earn your vote. They should earn your respect. They should be a type of person that you would want to see in whichever office that we're putting them in, whether it's in City Hall, the state capitol, the Capitol in Washington up on Capitol Hill, or the White House. Like, we shouldn't say like, oh, I'm thinking about X for Y, but X doesn't seem worthy of Y, or like they'll be respectable in that space. I certainly know, and I think many people, especially those who are watching, agree that we are all very frustrated and disappointed with what's happening currently. I read one of the, thoughts on Twitter said it only took the current occupant of the White House 3 years to turn the whole country into Atlantic City. The many failed casinos, shutting down a whole city's economy and livelihood. Now that's happened across the nation. So you have to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah. I think we pretty much talked about the idea, because we talked about semi-dissident when we talk about Puff and him saying he might hold his vote. We talked about myself and Colin Kaepernick, who have no trust in this system, because you look at it and say, what has this system done for us? Right. And so I think there's many ways to skin a cat. I don't know who came up with that analogy. But that's
I don't want to skin a cat.
As my cat goes up the steps, right, when I say it, because he might be a little nervous. I just think, again, there's many ways to truly attack this beast that we call society, right, and trying to enact change. And, you've chosen to go the route of politics, which is a very interesting route to take. I'm always, I want to say surprised. I'm always surprised when Black folk get into politics, right? Just given what it's been historically, and again, the lack of representation. So I guess that would be my, as we start to wrap up, what brought you to the political arena? I know you said you went to LaSalle. Shout out to Sherilyn Rush, the good homie.
Yes, she's the best homie.
But what drove you into politics?
So I went to LaSalle and studied political science, fall of 1999. And I did that because my mentor at the time was an attorney at a big firm in Philly, and she had been mentoring me through the Explorers program. And I would go down to her law office, and she went to LaSalle, and she was poli-sci, and then she went to law school and became what looked to me as this great, spectacular lawyer. So between her and a couple of others, they said, well, that's the major you choose. And I went there, purely with that major to go to law school 4 years later. And very grateful that 4 years later, I went to Villanova Law School and came out and was a public defender for about 10 years. And I never had any political interest. I did internship after internship because it was my major and I enjoyed it. It was exciting. And I always loved supporting candidates, supporting a legislative office. But in terms of picturing myself in public space, I didn't see that. Now, why didn't I see that? Probably because I never worked for a Black woman elected official. I'm gonna snap for myself. That's what's happening. Probably because I didn't, of all the folks I worked for, they didn't look like me, and they weren't, women from Southwest Philly. So I think that's probably the main reason why I never had that aspiration. But I left the public defender's office. I went to work for my state senator. Shout out to Senator Williams. I was his chief counsel for 2 years. I had hoped to be there for a while. And quite honestly, Phil, it was the first time I realized that the decisions that are made in our state capital, they affect everything. So when I was a young public defender fighting mandatory minimums, and I hated it because the DA would always hold it over your head like this. well, I can offer you 6 months of probation, or you can fight the 3 to 6 year mandatory minimum. And you're like, come on, that's not fair. That's not right. But that scenario aside, that came from the state capitol. Sentencing guidelines that didn't seem fair, that came out of work through a legislative branch of the state capitol. So it wasn't until I was working for the senator, with my notepad, sitting in the background, taking notes, taking meetings, that I started to really put pieces in a puzzle together to see whether or not you vote, decisions are being made for your schools, decisions are being made for student debt, decisions are being made for health care, decisions are being made for the criminal justice system, whether or not you participate in the process. So when the opportunity arose, although it wasn't my life plan, or even when I was working in the Senate, something I saw myself doing, I thought, if I don't try, when I have sat here and represented people who were in the worst case of their lives, and I had to stand up and speak on their behalf, why not see if I can stand up and speak for them in Harrisburg, in the state capitol, after having worked in the behind the scenes capacity for a bit?
Word. Listen, you got the chops for it. That's for sure. You definitely got the chops for it. I don't know if I necessarily would use examples of school that school what's happening in schools and student debt. Those aren't the best places to to say that decisions are being made, because clearly when we go into these schools and we see the asbestos and dilapidated books and just these complete environments. That's why I laugh at the census, right? When I keep getting these things in my mail and it's just like, it'll help the schools. And I'm like, damn, it could get worse than this, right? Can it get worse than this? And so again, this discourages people, because you say, okay, you're telling me that if I do the census, what's happening up in my crib, this gonna make the schools better. But kids out here, and we know black kids, especially black boys in Philadelphia, their number one reason for going into the emergency room is asthma, right? And so they're going into these schools with asbestos or what have you. Again, it makes you look at the system kind of funny, right? Kind of
It
funny.
does. And I'll tell you, being on the inside, you look at it even more funny. One of the meetings that I had this week was on what our Philadelphia delegation's agenda and priority will be as we run into this budget. Because no matter how much our region contributes to the budget, once it's carved and carved and carved and carved, it never seems to be sufficient or enough. And we know that that is because the people who are in the even more power than you and I have said, well, this is going to be for this and this is going to be for that. And the thing about schools, it is just the worst funding formula ever. When I was in law school, it was, I think, spring of '05, I took an education law class and saw for the first time what the investments are per student in different counties and different school districts. And Pennsylvania, until this day, is still contributing not at the rate. Because it's funded off of property taxes, it is set up to have you people who pay little property taxes have little resources for your little school. And that's not right. That's not fair, because our children who are going into these schools, they don't have a job where they're getting a check to pay taxes. So it's not fair. And it is so disproportionate that we see the outcomes. And we know about the pipeline, as I was a public defender, that leads our children, sadly, from these schools that are not invested into right to prison.
Yeah. I worked in Norristown as a therapist for, on and off for a good part of 5 or 6 years. And I just shook my head. Right, I just shook my head going from school to school.
You were in the state hospital?
No.
Okay.
I worked within the schools, and so my clients were, I would go check up on them in school, and I was just a part of the job, and I would just be like, it's no way in hell y'all going to make it. Like, and I, looking at the teachers who were completely disconnected from the population that they were serving. They had no insight. They had no awareness, and then we add just the level of poverty that existed out there. It was just like when we talk about this prison to school to prison pipeline, it was just real. I saw it, and I think that was really the first time that I saw it. And coincidentally, I see one of my former clients, testifying in a murder trial, right? Because he got shot up, and it was just like all I could do was shake my head, right? Because I recognize the lack of resources that exist in these impoverished neighborhoods, and how little attention is shown to that, and how we're we keep forcing this idea of you have to be resilient, you have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But part of me says, listen, you have no choice but to if you want to make it out of here, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to, I would tell some of my clients that, listen, your parent not going to get it, right? Now, you just have to accept that, right? You have to accept that your parent is not going to get it, and it could potentially be ever. You have to accept the fact that your community is not going to understand. They're not going to get it, and that puts so much pressure on children, adolescents and children to succeed, right? And they're just not equipped for it. So no, I completely understand when you reference that. Before we get out of here, just your thoughts on third party alternatives when we talk about like the Green parties, Jill Stein's, I'm surprised her name hasn't popped up recently, for a third party. So just what are your thoughts? Do you look at it as being a wasted vote?
There is not a wasted vote, but when you look at what the goals are and the priorities are, sometimes deciding to vote for a third party candidate who will not be able to overcome the stronghold of the two parties is really a problem. So I'll give you an example. In Harrisburg, my goal is for our House Democratic Caucus to go from 93 members to jump up into the majority. We need to get 9 more members. We have to hold on to everybody who's already there, some of which will have some really hard battles coming up throughout this year leading to November. And then we have to get some new folks. So if you're in an area where we're trying to, for instance, get a new person, not a new folk, a new member, get a new member, and a good portion of that voting base says we're going to go third party, that hurts us in Harrisburg. That hurts Joe Biden trying to get to the White House. That has so many repercussions that you are hampering larger progress that could bring about better change for your family. For instance, so we've had the lowest minimum wage in our area. It is still stuck at the same rate it was in '06. I waited tables all through law school. What my colleagues at Olive Garden were making then for the tipped wage hour, they are still making in 2020. We are not able to convince the majority, God bless them, of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that people are worth more than $7.25 an hour. So that being said, we need people to vote blue in November. We need you to vote blue. We need those people who are holding the minimum wage at the same rate since '06, and they've been in the majority throughout these years. We need them to say, sayonara. We need some of them to go back to where they were and just not be in the ability to make these decisions because they're holding back working families. And then some families who aren't even working, who are struggling, people who are holding on to 3 minimum wage jobs. And if you're making 9, it's not much more. I mean, it is $2 more, but it's not like, oh, you're making 25. So we see little progress on issues that should be changed around.
Yeah.
So vote blue. Don't vote third party because we need to flip these seats. Like,
if we took that, what's her name? Kendra Brooks, right? Didn't she run for the Working Families Party? So that wasn't necessarily, red or blue. And so
that was a different dynamic. We're not going to water down state politics with city council races. I was very proud to vote for council member Kendra Brooks. It was very different. I mean, the way the scheme is, there have to be 2 members from a minority party. I would never be voting for the Republican folks. So, of course, I'm going to say, well, Kendra, absolutely. So I was proud to push her button in November. And because they're going to be 5 from the majority, the likelihood was that the majority would still be Democrats. So those 5 Democrats whose names were on that ballot, even though you couldn't vote for each of them and 2 of the other party, they were going to be winners. They're going to make it. But these folks I'm talking about who are out not even far from us, Bucks County and Bensalem, who are in Chester County, not far from us. We go along with Gardens. We need Democrat representing that area, right? And Kent, where the mushroom mushroom farms are. We need a Democrat representing that area. Media, right, go past Springfield Mall. We need a Democrat representing that area. Like, if we can pick these seats up, hello, we are in a better position to not just really change minimum wage, but also change the funding formula. What folks don't realize, when you're in a legislative body in the minority, I could have a bill to fill up every one of these pages. But if I don't have the votes to bring it out of committee, and then the votes on the floor for the whole board to light up and go my way, I'm just sitting over here saying, Mr. Speaker, can I be recognized? I got something to say.
Well, I'll say this. If I lived in your district, I don't necessarily know if I would vote, but I would think about it for a few hours. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate the consideration. That's all I can ask. I'm not asking for a shoe-in. I'm not asking for a MJ layup. I'm asking for the consideration to earn it from everyone who's in my area.
Word. So do you see yourself in the future running for higher offices?
I see myself serving my neighbors.
See, I knew the political answer was going to come at some point.
I mean, what exactly do we consider to be higher offices, right?
I don't. Again, it's your world. So, what do you consider higher? Would the Senate be considered higher? You
asked the question.
I guess we would say, and just basing it off, because at one point I did look up, so I can argue a point. Those in the House make less than those who are in Senate, right? So if we just go off the pay scale, we're talking about those, potential Senate seat.
No, the Senate is a higher chamber. There are only 50. And in my house, the People's House, we are 203. We run every 2 years. The Senate runs every 4 years. Our constituency, I have 60,000 of my neighbors I serve. The Senate serves 250,000. So they have larger areas that they serve as well. So it is considered the upper chamber. The answer is, I didn't want to say I don't know. Phil, I'm just trying to make it through quarantine. But
But that's what I appreciate, though. No.
You made me say it. Like, Phil, I'm just trying to get through my mail-in ballot for June 2nd. You talking about?
Listen, you can keep it real with me. If that's one thing.
I'm just trying to get Trump out the White House.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna have for dinner after this, because I don't have the food that you have. Right? I went to Dollar General and got me some fake oodles and noodles. You know what I mean? Listen, I told you my pandemic unemployment check ain't come yet. Maybe you could help with that.
Will you call my office? No vote needed. We'll be glad to help you through that, because people are having a hard time getting feedback. And I apologize. The system has just been overwhelmed. We have a liaison at Harrisburg for every state department. So that includes the Department of Labor and Industry. That includes the Department of Revenue if you owe taxes. That includes Department of Justice. You got a loved one, Department of Corrections, a loved one in state prison. We have liaisons with all of these state agencies. We call, they pick up, they let us know what's going on, and we work on your behalf. So we really are happy to see you through that process.
Word. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy COVID schedule to come on Rhetorically Speaking with little old me. It means a lot to me.
Oh, stop it.
No, that's real, man. Because again, you could have been like, nah, I've been sunned by a few offices. And this when I was on like radio. They was like, what the question's going to be. I told him, listen, I don't know. Whatever the spirit leads me to ask you. Right? Shout out to the defenders. No, but because again, that's just how I roll, man. I never try to embarrass anybody. That's never my intent, right? But I think the issue is we never get the real, we never get the truth from people in general, let alone politicians, right? Because it is a game, right? We're all navigating this game of life, and certain professions just is you got to be a lot really crafty to be a participant in it. So no, it means a lot for me, for you taking time out of your schedule. So last question. So are you team Issa or team Molly?
Wait a second. This is a swing one. Say that one more time.
All right. So you might not watch. Do you watch Insecure?
Oh, I've been saving them up.
Come on.
I've been saving them up.
Are you at least on this season?
I'm up to the last season. When I say I've been saving them up, yeah. I look at my DVR and it's every Sunday night they're saving up for me.
Okay. All right.
So,
Well,
so the toughest day I have on quarantine, I'm just going to be sitting there like, what? Issa, what? I'm sure I'm going to be Team Issa. I'm not going to be Team Molly
yeah.
because Molly's full of herself. I saw that from the last several seasons.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Issa's just out here trying to figure things out and make worlds better for a lot of people and brighter. So I'm definitely going to be Team Issa.
Word, word. Well, I know you said you wear a lot of hats, man, but make sure you're taking time for yourself and your individual wellness. So, you know, if you can turn the phone off, right? Turn everything off and just focus on you. That self-care piece is so important because, like I said, you know, you do have a voice that's unique, right? I didn't know what to expect. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. But you know, you've shown me something, and I'm impressed, right?
You don't have to say it like that.
Listen, not to say because the bar hasn't been really high from the people that I've seen, right? But no, I'm thoroughly impressed. You know,
Oh my
Sherilyn will be
goodness.
proud for sure. So that was PA State Representative Joanna McClinton, who represents the district 191. Do y'all call it the 191 district? 190.
191st.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
191st district here in Philadelphia. So again, I appreciate you for tuning in and thank you.
Glad to be here, Phil. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
All right, peace. And so everybody else, listen, I appreciate you all for tuning in. Tomorrow we have on Mr. Nafis Ricks, who is the assistant basketball coach at Missouri University. Missouri University. So tune in for that. Again, make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Shout out to those who are watching on Facebook. Until next time, America, peace.